Hello my bookish friends out there in booktube land, and have I got a lovely video for you today. Today we're looking at 10 excellent autumn reads, because summer is almost over and autumn kicks off at the beginning of September, and is one of those seasons which captures all the moods of weather but becomes the nostalgic season. It's a time of endings, of reflection. Nostalgia is very much tied to autumn, and so if you want some good reads for autumn that fit that kind of vibe, and some new recommendations of books you may never have heard of but are still classics, then this is the video just for you. So without further ado, let's dig in, shall we? The first classic is a French classic, and it is Le Grand Meaulnes by Alain-Fournier. He wrote it in 1913 and then died a couple of years later in the First World War, tragically. This is a book that captures nostalgia and the striving to capture that moment of long lost love. It's perfect for autumn, capturing certain sunshiny days but change as well, and a reflection of a time gone by, moving between the end of youth to the beginning of manhood. So we're set in the small village of Sologne, where in the mixed class of kids in the school, there is one François Surel, who is our narrator. Now, all the kids are very excited one day when Augustin Meulnes comes into the class. He's very tall, hence they call him Le Grand Meaulnes, the tall Meulnes. One day, he's daring, charismatic, they all love him, he's good looking, but one day he goes into the woods and he comes across like a party, a magical party as it were, at a dilapidated estate where there's a girl there called Yvonne, and her odd brother, Franz, and her father. And they're holding this party. He attends and he just gets, you know, that love you get when you're young. It's so full and so fresh and so alive. And then he leaves the woods and he tells everyone at school about what he has seen and done. And then the whole book is about him trying to recapture it, trying to find that place again, trying to hold on to that love, but between holding on to it and then the mature resignation that you should do in order to carry on your life. And of course, Francois and Augustin's friends are watching, seeing that this hope could destroy him. So that's the story, a very reflective, introspective, but captures a magical world, you know, of a bucolic world, one that's just so innate to all of us. So that was the first one. The second classic on our list is from India, and it is Indulekha by Chandu Menon. Now, I haven't read this book because in most of my lists, I like when I'm researching to find books for me to engage with that I haven't already read. Now, this book is an Indian classic, and some say it's the first Indian realist novel written in the late 1890s. Indulekha is a young woman from the Nair caste in the Kerala, state of Kerala in India today. Now, the Nairs, interestingly, had a matrilineal inheritance system, so inheritance went through the mother's line. The family want her to marry an older man from now it would be the Nabudiri caste system, so a Brahmin caste. But he's much older and she's not drawn to him, and she doesn't agree with all of the traditions that they have because there can be polygamy involved. But more importantly, Indulekha already loves someone called Madhavan. Now, because of the tensions and the expectations and almost the feudal setup at this time and the impositions of a strict society, Madhavan runs away to, I think it's Chennai, where he he's living his life making friends, and he's the main character. But of course, Indulekha, she's got to contend with all the problems that are put on her. Now, this will go into some detail, apparently, not graphic, but of injustices, especially between the sexes. However, how will it work out? can love be truly separated? What trials will they face along the way? Now this, in my research, would be classed as an autumn read because it's quite serious, it's introspective, and it challenges, as it deliberately did in its day, it challenged some of the societal norms that Chandu realised needed to be changed, that just weren't fair. It's also a love story, and that always harkens to a bit of nostalgia, doesn't it? And the travailed couple. So I've heard in my research, I've read a fair bit about this, that this fits the autumn scene, but particularly would fit sort of September, when there's still the sun, but it harmonises with that idea of changes coming and being able to reflect and look back. So there you go, Indulekha. Now the third classic pick for an autumn read is going to be very popular because I know a lot of you mentioned it last year when I didn't include it, and I'll give you a clue. Do you know the opening line? I dreamt I went to Mandalay again last night. Yes, it's Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca, a wonderful gothic. And if you haven't actually read Rebecca, pick it up and read it. It is phenomenally good. Du Maurier is a great, great writer. And this one just oozes atmosphere and full-on autumn atmosphere. Although it doesn't say it's autumn, you know, you've got the rains and the bedashed leaves of the trees and the shades and the mists and the wind. Actually, I don't even know if there is a mist, but I always sense there is because it's just got that autumnal vibe. So in our story, we have an unnamed narrator, and she starts with that comment I said. She dreamt again of Mandalay last night. And we learn that she's the widow of a Maxime de Winters, and she can't go back to Mandalay, the estate. We then get taken through the story of how she first meets Maxime de Winters, this eligible bachelor who's in his 40s. She falls for him and he ends up marrying her. But when she moves to his estate in Cornwall, Mandalay, all's not as it appears. There's something haunting the house, as it were. And I don't mean a literal haunting, a ghost. There's just this presence, this vibe. And she learns that Maxime has been previously married to a woman called Rebecca. And for some reason, this woman casts her thrall, even after death, over the whole house. And there's troubles between our narrator and her new husband. There's something that she can't quite connect with him. He gets withdrawn. She's not allowed into Rebecca's room. And then worst of all, and great to read, is the menacing character of Mrs. Danvers, who looks after the house for Maxime de Winter, and who seems to have had a great connection with the previous Madame de Winter, that is Rebecca. There is some shocking bits in this book, and I'm not going to tell you at all where it goes, but our narrator feels like her husband regrets marrying her and that he's still caught up on Rebecca. Or how do you navigate that situation? Also in the isolation and seclusion of this great house, which makes for the perfect gothic backdrop. But this is gothic with a difference, and you have to read it to find out. And to be honest, if you read it in October, that would be a good time to read it. If you can hear a whirring, it's an aeroplane just flying over outside. So our fourth classic book is one that to me seems to catch the complete essence of the autumn spirit. Because it's not all about weather and trees and stuff in autumn. For me, autumn is a quiet month. It's a month that is very sensitive to the soul. It's introspective. It talks about quieter kinds of love as opposed to the riotous, windswept love of spring and summer and everything's possibilities. Autumn turns it around. It's sort of an ability to dwell and rest and linger on emotions and ideas. So this story is The Truce by the Uruguayan writer Mario Benedetti. From what I've researched on this is going to be right up my street, and so expect future videos on this book. It's a short story, and in it we have, set in Montevideo, so the capital of Uruguay, and it has rain and it has mists and tapping winds on windows and all that kind of stuff. But we have Martin Santome, who is a chief accountant at a firm. But he's grown, older now. His wife died when giving birth to her third child, Jamie, and he lives with his children, who I believe are Jamie the third, and then there's Esteban and Blanca. But they're older, they're young adults now, and nothing makes sense to him. They're mystifying the way they behave, and he doesn't feel life has any surprises left for him until a young girl called Laura moves into the firm, and he falls for her. He loves her demeanour. She's very discreet, self-possessed, proper, and he falls in love with her, even though she's the same age as his oldest daughter. The interesting thing is, unexpectedly, Laura falls in love with him, and so burgeons a new romance. A romance unexpected and unlooked for from Martin's point of view. Certainly unexpected from Laura's, I would imagine. But nonetheless, what happens when two hearts unite, irrespective of age? And there's the story. And apparently this is a really tender story, and I certainly am looking for it, and I'm going to read it, and I will be doing a video on it. I'll tell you that now. Our fifth book is a book that just doesn't get talked about anymore, and yet was one of the great spy thriller novels, even though it's very short. And it is The Riddle of the Sands by Erskine Childers. Or Childers, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Anyway, in this book, our main protagonist is Carruthers, who works for the Foreign Office, I believe it is, and he's a bit down in the dumps because at the end of the season, so at the end of summer, everyone's gone away to this big party somewhere, but he's had to stay in the office. Someone has to man the desk, kind of thing. And so when he gets his chance to go on holiday, he's got no one to go with, and ends up responding to a letter from an old school friend who he's not really close to, called Davis, who had said, "Do you want to come out and join me on a boating trip up and down the north coast of Europe, the Frisian Islands above the Netherlands, and on into the Baltics?" And he says yes, but he's really moody about it. Anyway, Carruthers and Davis are chalk and cheese. Davis can slum it, Davis is tough and hardy, Carruthers lacks his comforts. But he's committed to this boating trip and has to quickly learn how to operate in this ramshackle boat, to be quite honest. But he is quite enthralled by how brilliant Davis is. And in the book, you have great scenes, the waves coming in over breakers and sandbanks and navigating perilous turns of tide. Now, there is a character that's bumped into, an entrepreneur, mysterious German entrepreneur called Dolman, who has this posh yacht. There's something not right there, and it becomes a growing menace. This is so clever, this book, because it's not overtly a spy book. At the beginning, it's a growing suspicion that the Germans are up to something on the German Frisian Islands. But what is it? And the way this book slowly pulls you in, and when I say slowly, I mean it's not a slow-moving book, because there's so many features of just being on the sea and moving around and operating the boat that is really fascinating and engaging. But this bigger story comes hauling along the line. And it's just great, right? This book, some say this book set up the spy genre as we know it. It's running alongside other books for that title, such as, I don't know, The Mask of Demetrius would also be very much one of those founders of the spy genre as we know it. Anyway, I'm distracted. But that's the fifth book, The Riddle of the Sands. Very worth your time reading. October, maybe, September, certainly. If it begins raining or if you see mists, get it out. In sixth place is a great classic by the English author Thomas Hardy. Hardy is wonderful for seasonal books. If you're thinking, oh, I want something to match a season, I would always recommend you go to Thomas Hardy, because is there anyone that can capture the sense of season, of air, of place, of nature like Thomas Hardy? He's absolutely brilliant. Now for autumn, I always go to the real chestnut, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Now this is a book that is going to pull you to pieces emotionally. Like, it's a love story, but you know, you take some shares out in Kleenex or something, because you're going to need it. So in the story, you have young Tess. She belongs to quite a poor family, rural, you know, in Wessex, which is Lower England. And due to some throwaway comment by a vicar, her father begins to wonder whether their name, was it d'Urberville or something like that, is linked to an aristocratic family called the d'Urbervilles. And so it turns out that Tess ends up involved with Alec d'Urberville. She wants to get work with him because she thinks if it is relations, then maybe we'll be able to get some work and help support the family. But Alec d'Urberville is a rake and a scoundrel and a bad boy, okay? Tess gets into a bit of trouble. I'm not going to spoil it all for you. She moves away, and she also meets Angel Clare, another character who she falls for quite deeply. Now, I don't want to go through the whole story because it's such a worthwhile story to just discover on your own, but there's a scene in the potato field which really makes me think of late autumn. There's so much beauty in the dairy farm that she goes to work in, and the characters she's with, and those moments of elation and joy and expectation, the moments of disappointment, the moments of trouble. There's a scene when it's harvest time, so again we're talking autumn, and she goes to this one place where they're celebrating, and it's in this upper hayloft, this barn, and the party and the cider and the singing and the heat. You can feel the heat of the bodies in the description as they swirl around dancing. There's almost a moisture in the air, a humidity, but outside it's evening, and it's, everything is perfect. The scents of flowers, you feel the shadows of hedgerows when you're walking along. This book is one of the most atmospheric books, but has one of the greatest stories. I mean, great stories, which is very critical of Victorian England's attitude towards women, how the institutions, most men with their wives, and like they love each other, and people of all ages, people of all sexes through history have pretty much got on, but institutions and those at the top tend to oppress and put on these, strictures which harm, and the woman in particularly suffered. And this caused a bit of a scandal because of what happened in the book. I can't remember how it was phrased. Tess of the d'Urbervilles, the story of a pure woman, I think it was called. Anyway, very, very, very worthwhile read. But remember, Hardy is very much a person who, if you summed up his books in one word overall, suffering, travail, hardship, injustice. But suffering would be the top one. But it's so deep. So that's the next one, Tess of the d'Urbervilles. It captures the sounds and the sights and the feel of autumn. It gives you the introspection. It makes you think about life, and it's just brim full of emotion. So there you go. Tess of the d'Urbervilles, Thomas Hardy. Our next classic book is another one from India. So if you're looking for something from a different culture, or to have a different look at life, then this might be something you want to grab hold of, and it's certainly something I've already ordered because I was doing the research for this. Now this one is called Godan, and it's by Munshi Premchand, quite a renowned Indian author, Hindi author. Now Godan means cow gift, cow donation, and it's apparently a very tender book and thoughtful. And yet it deals with some tough topics, notably the life of, the poor village person, the deprivation of the poor, the unfairness of the way structure is set up, and how what happens if you want to better your life, but you simply can't. The capabilities, the capacity to do it is just not there in society. And so this is something that makes us, with that trouble, explore ourselves, explore what it means to be human, often it's through enduring trials that we learn the most about ourselves. So in this story, it focuses on the village life of poor characters in a village in India. But the main character is Hori, and he has a family. His wife's Dania, and he's got Rupa and Sona and a young lad whose name is Gobar, and he, is trying to make his way like all other people, and he decides that he would like a cow. A cow would really, like a lot of the poor want a cow, the cow would really help him with his work, would really improve his chances of getting out of like poverty and deprivation and looking after his loved ones. But how does it go? How do you raise the money for a cow? What about looking after the cow? And then there's lots of other things that add on to this, such as what happens when family don't behave correctly towards you or cause trouble, but at the same time you have a loyalty towards family as well, which could also run you into the ground. What happens when capitalism comes calling? And no, it's not an anti-capitalist book as far as I'm aware. It's just these are the structures that were in society. What happens then? And that's the story. Now, the reason it's autumnal is because it follows the planting, then the harvest cycle. You get from the cow that it's going to be to do with agriculture. And so it's very harvest based as it moves along, which of course is a particular time of year, albeit very different in look from how autumn looks in the West. So there was your next one, Godan by Premchand. Our next book is a classic from Japan by the author Natsume Soseki. Now, Soseki's work is something I've been really getting into. We did Kokoro recently in the Patreon group, but then there's Botton and Sanshiro. But here's one for autumn for you that is satirical and should make you smile, and it is I Am a Cat. Now, as you may imagine, this book is written from the perspective of a cat. I know some people think they're not going to enjoy this kind of thing, but have you ever tried reading a book from an animal's perspective about humans? The picking of the cat is genius by Soseki, because the cat is so supercilious in his tone, so condescending, and strangely objective in his judgments of the people whom he's watching in this house. And he lampoons them and needles them and passes comments, but using quite an archaic way of writing or speaking, which in Japan has become very much associated with a supercilious kind of animal. In fact, this book is read, I've been told, at high school quite a lot and leaves a long-lasting impression. But it started as a short story, but was so popular in Japan that Soseki turned it into a full book. Now, the cat is watching, he lives at the house of Kushimi sensei, so it means Mr. Sneeze, basically. And he's got a couple of friends that keep coming round, one who's sort of a willy-won'ty kind of relationship that he talks about a lot, and their pretensions to social climbing, to being scholastic if they could be, sort of the bohemian aesthete kind of idea amongst these characters. And the cat sort of picks on them as they talk about all sorts of strange things, from metaphysics to tea to, what's going on in someone else's relationship. Think sort of like neighbourhood gossip kind of thing. But the cat's taking all of this in and sort of ridiculing it because it has that objective, this is an animal talking about humans. However, it's not fully objective because the cat, notoriously across cultures, a proud character just because of the way it sits and stares at you without blinking. This book is ever so clever, and it particularly needles the obsession with the middle class of Japanese society back then, trying to imitate the West and dressing up in Western clothes, etc., etc. So, if you like satire, you want something different, you want something culturally different as well, then get hold of I Am a Cat by Natsume Soseki. And the reason I put this in autumn, because it's not season specific, the book. However, when you read it, most of it takes place inside, in like the tatami rooms, which is named after the mats. Think like dim lampshades at evening shining through a window, and there's the rainfall at night, all that kind of stuff. that's why I put it in autumn. It's fun, it's satirical, it's wrap yourself in a blanket and have a cocoa kind of reading. I just want to interrupt this list for a quick word from our sponsors, which is you, the viewer. If you enjoy this kind of video, if you enjoy the classics, you want to get more out of reading, etc., and join a community of other book lovers, then consider coming over to my Patreon, where it's $5.99 a month. You can get access to 3 exclusive videos a month, and there's a book that we all read together in the month, after which we have a meeting in the first weekend of the next month, where you can join in and hear other people's angles on the book. We discuss various aspects that we liked, didn't like, and do you know what? You get, this is what everyone says about it, you get so much more from a book when you spend good time talking with others who have read the same book. It is one of the most welcoming communities as well. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, go over to Patreon. Now, back to this list. The penultimate classic on our list is another French classic, and it's from the 19th century, and it's for those of you who want a challenge, who want to go on an epic adventure, you know, really diving deep into something and spending a long time with it. And it is, of course, Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. This book is, wow, like out of the world brilliant. It's not at all like the musical, which everyone thinks they don't need to read the book because they know the musical so well. The musical's actually brilliant. I love the musical, and all of that is there in the book, but so much more. Hugo uses so many observations about life, so many aphorisms that tell you the guy has stopped and seen the world like most of us don't, to really pay attention, to perceive the inner motivations of characters. Oh, we may say, oh, I know this kind of character, that kind of character, but to draw them like Hugo does, oh my days. Like every page has about 3 to 5 amazing lines in it. If you think of the musical, you'll know about the bishop who gives silver to Jean Valjean. You know, he features in like 2 songs, I think it is. The first 100 pages is taken up with the bishop. And what a character, and how important he is as the grounding influence of the main character, Jean Valjean. So Jean Valjean, of course, in the story, he's a convict. We learn that he was put in prison for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his sister's starving child. Tried to escape, ends up 20 years in prison, working on the galleys. And when he's finally let loose, he has to carry around a badge of shame, this certificate that he had once been in prison, and no one wants to take him on for work. And he skips bail and is pursued by the over-righteous, the excessively righteous, the unbending, unwavering, non-merciful Inspector Javert, who is a great character because he has this clinical, cold intelligence, but has a rigid belief in human systems and institutions, whereas you look at Jean Valjean, who understands humanity. And then the myriad people they come in contact with, the life that's built. You can't begin to describe this book well enough in just a couple of minutes. But if you want to read, it's about 1,300 pages. So what I would suggest is if you've seen my video on how to get through long books or how to read more, I suggest reading just 12 pages a day rather than forcing yourself to do 100 and burning yourself out. At 12 pages a day, if you start on September 1st, you could have finished Les Misérables by the end of autumn. Now that would be good, wouldn't it? And it will be a book that will forever stay with you. Now the final book on our list for autumn reads is, I suppose it's a bit of a classic in its own genre, but it's not necessarily a classic, neither is it a novel. It's a non-fiction book, and I absolutely recommend it, because this book makes you see and observe. It's called The Architecture of Happiness, and it's by Alain de Botton, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So The Architecture of Happiness it's just a sheer joy to read. You dip into it. You don't have to... In fact, I would recommend you don't just read it straight through in one sitting. I mean, it's pretty big anyway. But you dip into it and ponder on it. Because what I love about autumn, I love architecture. Okay, I'm not an architect. But we are surrounded by things. And like I say, I find autumn that time where things are slowing down, the seasons are changing, and you take time to notice things and reflect. Excuse me. And wherever you are, you will come across architecture. But why do we build places the way we do? How do we create a happifying environment in the structures that we build? What thoughts have gone into all of that? Do you know, when you read this book, you begin to notice things around you. Have you ever found it pleasant to look at a particular window or a particular structure and you just think, there's something so charming about that? Or something else mesmerizes you that's slightly abstract. Why is that? This book will help put some words to it. I'm going to just read you a snippet in this book, just to give you an idea of the writing. In fact, I might read two, because this is two different types of writing. So here's one, talking about cathedrals. Touring the cathedrals today with cameras and guidebooks in hand, we may experience something at odds with our practical secularism. A peculiar and embarrassing desire to fall to our knees and worship a being as mighty and sublime as we ourselves are small and inadequate. And that's because when entering into a cathedral, irrespective of beliefs, there is something so grand about the way it's designed. See how humans have created an architecture of happiness, an architecture of the soul. How do we do that? Through history. And that just gives you sort of words that lift the feeling. They sort of grasp the feeling that comes out of buildings and condenses it and explains it to us. We know the feeling. This gives us words. Another little bit, to give you an example of, you know, some of the really interesting stuff that Botton puts in. So he says, why do we change our minds about what we find beautiful? And then he says, in 1907, a young German art historian named Wilhelm Worringer published an essay entitled Abstraction and Empathy, in which he attempted to explain our shifts from a psychological perspective. And he says that this guy said there's two kinds of art, really, fundamentally only two. That is abstract and realistic. Abstract, patterns, shapes, fluid dynamics, all that kind of stuff. Realistic is mimicking nature. You think of the ancient Greeks, okay? And the stained glass in a cathedral has the images on, kind of thing. But why do we keep switching one from the other? And it says this: the most compelling aspect of Worringer's theory, a point as readily applicable to architecture as it is to painting, was his explanation of why a society might transfer its loyalty from one aesthetic mode to the other. The determinant lay, he believed, in those values which the society in question was lacking. So, if it lacked something, it began to put it into art, of which architecture is part of it. So that's a very interesting observation. That's just, you know, the kind of scholarly digging that you'll find inside this book. It's so accessible, it's full of photographs, but your mind will float to places you've already been, and it will change the way you look at your own house. So try and earn a lot of money, because you'll want to change quite a few things. Anyway, that's the last book which I'm putting on these lists now, which is a non-fiction. I personally thought this was brilliant, so I'm recommending it to you all. So there you have 9 classic books for reading in autumn and 1 non-fiction book which is also absolutely stunning for autumn. Tell me below which one of these captures your imagination the most. Which one of these do you think you'll run out to get and spend some time lingering upon in the next 3 months? Until the next time, I wish you joy in whatever you read.